Hello, so today I wanted to talk about how to make the Italian bind-off easier. It's very common for this to be suggested as a bind-off for 1x1 ribbing like I have here, and it just makes the edge sort of look like the knitting has continued, so it's a really nice option. However, it's also a little complicated to remember. Here's my first attempt at an Italian bind-off, and you can see I forgot what I was supposed to be doing and it didn't end up looking like 1x1 ribbing anymore. I got a little twisted around. Things are happening here that you shouldn't be seeing on an Italian bind-off. However, this is my second attempt, which looks much better and much more like it should. And I achieved this by accident, honestly. But it did make it a lot easier, so I'll be showing you how I did this today. If you're just here to see the new technique, skip to this timestamp on the screen. Otherwise, next I'm going to show you how to do the Italian bind off the normal way. So I've done a couple inches of some 1x1 ribbing here, and I'm going to be binding off with this pink color so you can see the difference. But if you obviously are going to continue doing your normal color, you'll need to break the string. You want it to be 3 times the amount that you need to bind off. So to start the bind off, what we're going to do is go into this first knit stitch purlwise. And then we're going to go into this purl stitch knitwise. But instead of going directly in knitwise, we need to go around the back and come through in between these first 2 stitches, like this. Come through in between those first, and then go in knitwise. So there we go. We've started the bind off now. And we can start through our pattern, which is going to be knit the knit stitch and pull it off. Then we're going to go to the next knit stitch, so skip this purl stitch, go through here and go through it purlwise like this. Let me get my ends in order. There we go. Now, the next purl stitch, we're going to go in purlwise and take it off the needle. And then we're going to do the same thing we did before to start on the purl stitch. We're going to come in between these 2 stitches and attack this purl stitch knitwise and pull. So this is, to me, where I lost track a bunch and how I got really wrapped around. In the previous example I showed you, is I kept forgetting to go up in between the next 2 stitches in order to knit the purl stitch. So now I'll show you how to make this a little bit easier. So in order to make the Italian bind off easier, what we're going to do is 1 row of combination knitting. You can obviously do this for this whole section, but at least the last row before bind off. So I've done a few combination stitches already. This is the beginning of the round. And you can see that what combination means is that you're going to have a combination of different mounted loops. So these are the knitted loops are going to be right leg forward, and the purled loops are going to be left leg forward. In comparison, this is where all of the stitches are mounted right leg forward. So all right leg forward, a combination. So in order to achieve combination knitting, what we're going to do is go into a knit stitch as normal, and then on the purl stitch, instead of wrapping the yarn in between the 2 needles and going through like that, what we're going to do is capture the yarn underneath this needle and pull through. So again, a normal knit stitch, and here we're going to put the yarn underneath this needle and pull through. And you can see that this one is now left leg forward. So one more time, knit as normal, and then here's the normal way to purl, which I use my middle finger to pull the yarn in between the 2 stitches. That's what I would normally do. But combination knitting is easier because I don't need any extra fingers. The position of the yarn makes it easier to just pull through by itself. So you could do all your ribbing in combination knitting. And that also makes it easier because when you come back to the stitch, you know whether you should knit or purl based on how they're on the needle. And you don't need to remember to yourself, knit, purl, knit, purl. You can just read what's on the needle and you know what to do next. You can also obviously do this with the yarn in your right hand. I'm not as good at it, but I'll show you. So you knit as normal, right leg in front, and then when you purl, you're going to go in purlwise, obviously, and then instead of wrapping the yarn in between the two needles, like this, instead of wrapping like this, which is counterclockwise if you're looking at the needle, instead of wrapping counterclockwise, you wrap clockwise. So towards you, left, and around in between the needles. And you pull it, and there you are. A purl stitch that has left leg forward. So one more time, English style. Purl, so yarn in front, into the stitch purlwise, and then yarn towards me, left, and in between the needles. So we're just going to do this last round with combination knitting, and then this is what makes the Italian bind off easier in my opinion. So I'll go through the whole row like this, and I'll meet you back at the beginning for the bind off. Okay, so we're back at the beginning of the round. Your knitting should look a little different. You have little groups of 2, it looks like. So now let's bind off. We're going to start the same way we did the regular Italian bind off, which is purling the first knit stitch, pull through, and then we're going to knit the first purl stitch, but we're going to go around in between the first 2 and then into this purl stitch knitwise. Okay, now once we're here, we can start the easy part. So we're going to take this knit stitch off and make sure when you look at it, the stitch is flat, right? We're going in knitwise, which means front to back through the loop that we've made. And then you're just going to go under the next knit stitch leg. Pretty straightforward. Same as before. But now we're going to do the purl stitch. So the purl stitch, we go behind and we pick up back to front. So purl-wise, but if you think about it, back to front, the same way that you wanted the knit stitch to be flat, the purl stitch is going to be flat. So back to front, and then you're just going to go under the next leg of the purl stitch. So I'll show you more specifically how that works in just a second. Next is another knit stitch. So we're going to take it off knitwise, make sure that the loop is flat, and then go under the next leg, right to left. So what makes this easier is what we're doing purl-wise, right? You want to go into the stitch purl-wise, which means picking it up back to front. The stitch should be flat. And then what you'd normally do is you'd go in between these 2 stitches that are still on the needle, and you'd go back through the purl stitch knitwise. But if you look, what happens when I do that is I've just gone through the back leg of this purl stitch. It's much easier to remember because it's basically the same thing that you're doing on the knit stitch, right? So don't pull too tightly, just pull until there's some resistance, and then we'll do the knit one again. You pull off the knit stitch front to back, and then go under the next leg of the next knit stitch. The part that takes the longest is pulling this long tail of yarn through. And then to do the purl stitch, we're going to do it the same way. So go into the purl stitch back to front, and then just through the leg of the next purl stitch, right to left, the same way that you did for the knit stitch. Knit the knit stitch under the next leg. Then you purl the purl stitch and through the next leg on the back. Knit the knit stitch through the next leg on the front, then purl the purl stitch through the next leg on the back. So that's how you can make your Italian bind off easier by using combination knitting. I hope that helped. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!